So this is a picture that I'll explain in a little bit. But I'm going to start with, here. These are my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, Shimon on the left and Chava on the right. They are my mother's parents. My grandfather on the left is from a place called Komorówka Podlaska, which is near the Belarusian border. And my grandmother, Chava, is from Wolbrom, which is about an hour away from where I am right now. And you can see on the map, I'm going to show you with my cursor. So here's my grandmother right here. This is where she was born and raised. And here I am in Krakow. So she's just about an hour north of me right now. And then all the way here on the right is where my grandfather, Shimon, grew up. I am a theater maker. So this means I do several things, including I act. There's a few pictures of me acting. Interestingly, as I was going through these last night, I realized that I mostly act in Jewish roles, which is something that I've been actually pondering since. This is me in a show called Disgraced. This is me in a show called Talk. This is me in a show called Our Class, which is actually a Polish play still running in Poland called Nasza Klasa. And here is me dead in a movie called Lucky Number 11. I was actually, this is the moment just before Bruce Willis comes in to the scene. This was a very exciting moment in my life. I am also a writer. So I write plays. On the left, you can see I write, and I often perform in the plays that I write. So you can see me in a play called The Book of Judith, which I made. On the top left, the bottom right is me performing in a play called Spain that I also wrote. And on the top right is a play called My Fellow Creatures, which I wrote. I also produce. So I'm the producer of a venue at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe called Canada Hub, which has been happening for 4 years. Sadly, we weren't there this year, and it's not looking good for next year either, to be honest. This is another show that I produced called Counting Sheep about the Ukrainian Revolution, the most recent one, not the first one, the second one. And there's this play here. This is a play called We Keep Coming Back. And we could say that the journey really began here with this play. Ezra talked about it in his opening narrative as well. So this is a piece that I made with my mother. And I made this piece because as a theater artist, one of the things that I like to do is I like to take problems that I'm having a difficult time solving from my real life, and I like to dramatize them. And the idea is that through the dramatization of these problems, I'll somehow be able to find certain resolutions. And so I was having problems with my mother, which, if you're Jewish, which I'm assuming the majority of you are, you might be familiar with the Jewish mother, Jewish son conundrum. And one of my theories was that the problems that my mother and I were having were connected to the deficit in a shared collective history that we could feel good about. My grandparents, who I introduced to you earlier, were both survivors. My grandmother survived the camps, several camps, including Auschwitz, and my grandfather survived by jumping off of a train on the way to Treblinka. He and his sister managed to squeeze through a window on a train, and then miraculously were able to hide in the forest, and then were found by the Polish partisans, where they fought for the rest of the year, or for the rest of the war, excuse me. But as a result, the narrative that we had around Poland in this place that they were from was quite negative. They lost their entire family during the war, the majority of their family during the war. And so this place called Poland that my mother and I were from was not something that we talked about. this is probably not an unfamiliar narrative for a lot of people, or when we did talk about it, it was always through the lens of the Holocaust. And so I felt almost as if we were from the Holocaust, which for some might be a controversial statement, but because we had no real relationship to Poland, it was a feeling that we had. And we had no relationship to this country that we were actually from. And so I proposed to my mother that she and I return to Poland. We go to Poland and we see where we're from, and we try to develop a relationship that was not only rooted in misery to this place that we were from, and through developing that relationship, we would be able to develop a more positive relationship to each other. My mother agreed to go on this wild trip with me. And we came back, and after the trip, we made this piece. And this piece is called We Keep Coming Back. And yes, you can see this is me and my real mom in the performance, if anyone wondered. This is my real mother performing. She's not a performer. However, she agreed to get on stage. She would say because she loves me that much. But I secretly think she just wanted to be a star. And she really is a star in this performance. You can see this is me and my mother in the, amidst a very tense moment. We used a lot of projection in the show. The show is really a retelling, or a dramatized retelling of the journey that we took coming to Poland. So this is us sort of at the beginning in the research phase where we couldn't even pronounce the names where we were from. This is me tracking our trip. This is a kind of wild dancing moments when I after I've introduced a woman who I meet in Poland. And you can see this is actually the technician in the show dancing with her face over his face. These are some of our family members. And then here on the left is a woman named Katka. Katka, who is someone that you should all know if you don't know, is the third part of this performance. And I'm not going to get too much into it. And I recommend, Ezra, that you actually consider bringing Katka in for a talk at some point. Katka wrote a book called The Return of the Jew. God, I hope that's right. The Return of the Jew, which is probably probably one of the leading scholars, or the book is probably one of the most important books in chronicling the kind of re-Jewing of Poland in a way, people discovering their Jewish roots and deciding to re-become Jewish. Katka, when we went to Poland, we realized we didn't speak any Polish, and so we needed a guide. And so we literally found Katka on the internet, and she agreed to come with us. And she ended up chronicling the trip. She's also a filmmaker. She was our translator, and she also agreed to perform in the show. And you can see, this is the three of us in the performance. Here's a few more shots of the three of us in this performance. This is us arriving in Komorówka Podlaska, which is my grandfather's hometown. And that ended up being where the majority of the play takes place, in Komorówka Podlaska. Here's us. Oh, a few of these have gotten small. Anyways. Here's us discovering that we actually went to the wrong Komorówka Podlaska because we didn't know in Poland. There are many places are called, have the same name. And here's us fighting, and this is the final moments of the play. This is actually something that I'm hoping to bring to Australia at some point. We were actually in plans to see about figuring out how to do it before COVID. And this is the end of the play, and this is important because you can see that we all came back to Poland. You can see it's written here. We all came back to Poland for Michael and Magda's wedding at the oldest synagogue in Krakow. And indeed, the play ended up becoming a catalyst for what my life has now become. And because of this journey into Poland, I ended up meeting a woman named Magda Korolewska, who's now Magda Rubenfeld-Korolewska, who's also now my wife. And you can see here is a picture of us being married in the old synagogue in Krakow. If you look down on the left, you can see my mother sitting there. At the bottom left, on the right is Magda's mother, Anna. And on the left is Rabbi Tanya Segal, who's actually the first female rabbi to, as far as we know, ever do a wedding in Poland, the first female rabbi, and she married us. Here's a few more pictures from the wedding. A few more pictures as well. So this is the old synagogue, which many of you are probably familiar with. Many of you have potentially even been. It normally operates as a museum. However, we used it as a synagogue for our wedding. The wedding itself was open. We wanted to make sure that anyone who wanted to come and witness could, because as you can imagine, there aren't that many Jewish weddings that happen in Poland. And we felt it was important for the public to be allowed in to experience something that would have been experienced many, many, many times over before the war. This is us on Szeroka. After the wedding, we made the decision to very publicly march down Szeroka, which for those who have been to Krakow know that, or those who are Polish speakers, means wide, the wide street, which was sort of the center of the former Jewish space in Kazimierz, which is the former and potentially current Jewish district of Poland. There's been actually a lot of debate as to how to refer to contemporary Kazimierz. We also felt it was important to have this public parade through Kazimierz. We wanted to make a spectacle, a little bit of a spectacle, or at least a public celebration of being Jewish, of having a Jewish wedding, an important Jewish ritual in Poland. Because again, it's very, very rare that you might get the opportunity to see something like this. And here's us dancing at the wedding. And after the wedding, Magda and I had a choice. We could choose to live in Canada, where I was from, or we could choose to live in Poland, where she was from, and ostensibly so was I. And that was the moment when we decided that we would live in Poland together, and we do now. Why did we decide to live in Poland? It's an interesting question that I continue to get from people in and outside of Poland. Many Jews are so confused by why I might live here, particularly because of the Poland narrative. Now, the Poland narrative is something that I grew up with, and a lot of Jews grew up with. Certainly, as a Canadian, it was not a positive narrative. The Poland narrative is this. The Poland narrative is this. The Poland narrative is this. And it's then Israel. At least that was my version of the Poland narrative. The March of the Living, for example, was a trip that I almost took, and I was quite looking forward to taking, because I wanted to go to what I understood to be a hellhole, the hellhole that is Poland, in order to be able to go to Israel, which is now the homeland. So you can imagine my surprise when I got to the hellhole and discovered it was anything but. So this is an image, a few images of some of the incredible things that are happening in Poland, and the incredible Jewish things that are happening in Poland. So the top left-hand corner is an image of the final night of the Jewish Culture Festival. So you can see here a stage, and this is actually Szeroka, which is the same street that we paraded down. And just here in the corner on the left where my cursor is, you can actually see the synagogue itself where we were married. So this is the old synagogue, and this giant stage with thousands of people crowd in the middle, who crowd the street for the final concert, which lasts about 10 hours. It's really magnificent. Here in the top right-hand corner is Plac Nowy, which is the former, Plac Nowy, and this is a place called the Okrągłak, which is the former Jewish butcher. And it was a former market. Down on the left is the Temple Synagogue, which before the war is the progressive was the Progressive Synagogue. It's not operating as a synagogue right now, but it's used quite a lot for Jewish things, including the concerts during the Jewish Culture Festival. It's magnificent, as you can see. We almost used it as our wedding, but I think selfishly, I knew that I wanted to be the star, but it's impossible to be the star when you go into this synagogue. The synagogue is the star. And on the bottom right-hand corner is the Warsaw JCC, which is my favorite JCC in Poland, partly because it really is a community center. You can see it in the middle of the summer. People are literally sitting out on the streets. Agata Rakowiecka, who's also an incredible leader of that Jewish community center, someone who I think everyone should know about and the work that she's doing. These are a few of the things that inspire me. Holy moly. I was absolutely flabbergasted. I thought I was going to Poland to just sort of go and see the absence, the deficit of Jewish culture. And I literally had no idea that Jewish culture was still going on. I didn't even know that Jews continue to exist in Poland. And so you can imagine just how flipped my brain was going. This was not what I expected. What did I expect? Well, I won't return to those pictures, but I really expected I expected almost a black and white country, to be honest. I expected to see only remnants of Auschwitz, to see just the devastation. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of devastation, but I did not expect to see new life in Poland, new Jewish life in Poland. And this is really, this was an interesting moment for me because it became a re-entry point back into Judaism for me. So earlier I showed you a lot of my, acting photographs where I'm playing Jews on stage. And to be quite frank, that was basically my Jewish culture. I was paid to play Jews quite frequently. I always identified as a Jew, but I was never really actively involved in Jewish community or Jewish culture in Toronto, where I was living. I'm originally from Winnipeg, but in Toronto, it really didn't interest me. Coming to Poland, something shifted. Once I started coming to Poland and started living in Poland and feeling like this is a place that I'm of, I started to feel that I wasn't just from the Holocaust, but that I'm from a real place, and that this real place is not just a graveyard. There are Jews in Poland. This place that I'm from, which was once arguably the most important pre-war Ashkenazic Jewish space in the world, where I thought, which I thought was completely gone, or I thought all the Jews were gone, is not actually true. There are Jews in Poland, and it's one of the growing, and it's a growing population, which was also completely shocking. And there are many non-Jews involved in Jewish memory and culture. Now, this is a really key point for me, because it makes sense to me that the Jews who remain in Poland are still working on Jewish culture or might be involved in Jewish memory. But the fact that there are non-Jews working on Jewish memory, working on Jewish culture, was really what made me feel like it was safe to return to Poland. Because it didn't feel like I needed to be, it didn't feel like I was going only to be a part of Jewish community. It felt like I could go and be a part of Polish society. The way that people think about the intersection of Jewish memory within the context of contemporary Polish society, and the way that non-Jews and Jews are working together to focus on memory in really meaningful ways. Really some of the most exciting work in and around Jewish memory and culture is happening by non-Jewish people, by Jews as well, of course, but also by non-Jewish people. And when trying to understand why that might be, a number of people say that they believe that Jewish culture is an essential part of Polish culture. Jewish culture and Polish culture are not separate. And so to be working on Jewish culture is to be working on Polish culture. So people feel like they are working on a culture that belongs, that they identify with. It is their culture. And that was also very surprising. And to me, felt very progressive. And also Poles, I learned that Poles are not all anti-Semites, like my Baba and everyone else told me. That was truly the narrative that I grew up with. And my grandmother really held on to this narrative, even sort of as she moved towards the end of her life. It did start to shift, but she had always said, I wouldn't go to Poland, not for a million years. You should never trust, not for $1 million. She said she would never go. Actually, not long before she died, I actually asked her. I said, "So if I gave you $1 million, would you still not go to Poland?" And she took a pause and she said, "I'd consider it," which was a huge leap, which was amazing. But I did grow up believing that Polish people are all anti-Semitic, and if I came, I would only experience anti-Semitism. This is something that is still rampant amongst Jewish people around the world. I felt comfortable being Jewish in Poland, and it felt meaningful to be a Jew in Poland. I didn't think I would feel as comfortable as I do being Jewish here in Poland. And it's meaningful to be a Jew in Poland to me because I feel like living here, I'm not living here only for myself. I have more family in Poland than I do anywhere else in the world. The majority of, but that family is no longer alive. But this is family who wanted to live in Poland and didn't have that opportunity. This is family who wanted to be alive and didn't have that opportunity. And of course, it's not just my family, it's millions of people who didn't have the opportunity to continue their existence. And so for me, I don't feel like I'm necessarily living only for myself. I feel like I'm also living for them here and continuing the Jewish chain. However, it's been a long time since Jewish narratives have been allowed to thrive in this country after the war and 40 years of communism. In my opinion, Poland needs more contemporary Jewish narratives because the way that Jewish culture operates in Poland is still, in my opinion, very strange. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's still a very young culture in a contemporary sense. It only began to start to kind of become public again in the 90s when communism ended. Of course, there are not a lot of Jews, but there's a lot of Jewish history. And there continues to be a lot of problems that need to be, in my opinion, resolved. And here are a few examples that I'm going to talk about, things that we've encountered. They're not all of them because we would be here for a long time, but this is a really important one. So parody. The representation of Jewish culture is often through parody. So here on the left-hand side, this is Soroka, which is the same place that we've already visited for my wedding and for the Jewish Culture Festival, which were two events that were not parody. However, on a normal day, you walk down the street and you see a series of restaurants, which are primarily Jewish-themed restaurants. And I use the word parody because because there's really nothing Jewish about these restaurants. In my opinion, they are using Jewish culture and commodifying it. For tourism. Now, a lot of that tourism, and I'm not going to get into this in this talk, but a lot of, this space became an incredibly popular space for tourists. When I say space, I mean Kazimierz in general. After Schindler's List was filmed here, we can go into that at some other point. But it's become a space that we call a Jewish Disneyland or Jurassic Park, because the culture here, the representation is not authentic, and it's not, and these spaces are not run by Jewish people. So on the bottom left is a space called Ariel, which is, in my opinion, the worst of them. Now, I want to be clear, these spaces I've got problems with, but I don't necessarily have problems with the people who are running them. A lot of, it's an open market, and there is a market for these things, and so people are filling the market, and there's no regulation, and so these kinds of things are bound to happen without regulation and education. So this is the inside of Ariel here on the right. You can see just loads and loads of images of Jews on the wall, and a lot of these images are problematic. I'll explain what that means in a second. And then here on the top right-hand corner is a hotel called Shalom Kazimierz. Some of you might have been on the tour that Adam Shorin and I give, and we covered this. As you can see, this is the logo for that hotel. It's a $ with a crown, and the space is called Shalom Kazimierz. Anybody would recognize the problems with the use of a $ in your logo for a Jewish, a so-called Jewish space. Eventually, I think we're going to try and work to get rid of, to force them to change that when we have the time. This is a mask that used to hang in the Ethnographic Museum. The Ethnographic Museum here in Poland, at the bottom, you can't read it, but it says, I think, Maska Żyda, or Mask of a Jew. So this is a Jew mask. It's an old mask, but it used to hang in the Ethnographic Museum, the Krakow Ethnographic Museum. It no longer hangs there, but it used to hang there with no real context. People didn't understand why on earth this mask, this Jew mask, was up there, and then that started to change. They started to build context, and they ultimately took the mask down. But it's indicative of how historical Jewish culture is represented in a space like the Krakow Ethnographic Museum, which for the most part is currently void of any real meaningful conversation around Krakow's former Jewish culture. And of course, in an ethnographic museum, you could imagine why that might be problematic. Now we're doing a lot of work with them. We have a partnership with them, and it's very exciting, and there are shifts happening, but that is an example of the kinds of problems. And another example is, this is a building called Hever Tehillim, was the space that held the former Hever Tehillim congregation before the war. Hever Tehillim means Brotherhood of Psalms. It's now currently a bar. However, not long ago, in the 2000s, these incredible frescoes on the wall were uncovered. They look quite shabby, as you can see in this photo, but they're actually quite magnificent, and it's actually quite rare to see former Jewish images, frescoes on walls that are this clear, that are still in color. So you can see, there's images of Jerusalem. It's really quite a magnificent thing. However, it's being rented to a bar, and that's not the issue so much. The issue is more that, so here it is in a state of renovation. And you can see right here is the niche where the former Arona Kodesh used to be, which held the Torahs. And that's what's there now. This is a door. So the owners of the space put a door where the former Arona Kodesh used to be. This is also another longer conversation, and it's quite complicated, but the space, they built a door and they named the bar Hevra, which is Hebrew for friends or bros. So they've come on, they've used, and it's also a kind of spin-off of the former Hever Tehillim, which is the name of the space. And so they've named the building for its history while also destroying the history. There was a lot of protest. A lot of people did not want them to do it. They understood the significance of the space where the former Arona Kodesh used to be, and they decided to put the door there anyways. So those are some examples of some problems, and then there's these, and we're going to go a bit more into these are what we call lucky Jews, or Jews with coins. In Poland, there's a tradition of buying and selling images of stereotypical looking, Orthodox Jews with money. And they do many different things with this money. They're either counting it or simply just holding it. People buy these images and they put them on their wall because they believe it brings them luck. Here's a few more. This is an image actually from a store called Obi, which is kind of like a Costco. I don't know if you have Costco in Australia, but you know, they were a major department store, and you could buy these images in major spaces. You no longer can at the Obi, but they are still all over the place. So these are a few of the problems. There's many more. I added even a couple more, and it's a long time. It's kind of a really long list. And you know, as an artist, I thought that it's actually really great for me as an artist. You know, one of the things that artists struggle with is, or can sometimes struggle, is what to make work about. There is absolutely no deficit of ideas of what needs to be made, what to make work about in Poland. And this leads us into contemporary, sort of my contemporary reality, and Festiwald. Now, Festiwald is, this is an image from one of our things. Festiwald is an independent arts collective that we started in 2017. We produce an annual program of critically minded Jewish art and activism in Krakow, Poland. This year, we're not only in Krakow, Poland, we're also virtual and around the world. But in a non-COVID year, although this is a conversation, we're still trying to determine what is the future. I think everyone's asking these questions. But each year we invite artists from Poland and around the world to produce visual art, theater, site-specific performance, activist interventions that engage with the complications of contemporary Jewish Poland. Now, this is something that I started with Magda, who is my wife, whose image you saw during the wedding. We also started with two other American Jews whose roots are in this part of the world, Jason Francisco and Maya Ip. And we continue to operate. And we basically, the heart of our operations is to look at these problems, some of these problems that I've outlined. There are others, and we make art projects that intersect with a lot of these issues. And I can go on and do a whole other 45 minutes about these projects, but I'm going to just focus on one for now, and it's called Lucky Jew. It's also the title of where we got the title of this presentation. This is me performing as a lucky Jew, and I'm going to play you a short video now, so you can see a little bit more, understand a little bit more about this. I'm going to actually stop the share just for half a second, so I can restart it, just to make sure that I have given everyone, that I've done it properly. Yeah, share computer sound, good, super. All right. So here's a little video about this project. Hi, I'm Michael Rubenfeld, Canadian actor, living now in beautiful Krakow, Poland. When I first came to Poland, I started to see these on people's walls. You can see there's a Jew and another Jew. They're counting their money and they're writing in their book. And people were selling them, people were buying them, they were putting them on their wall. People believe that putting these Jews up on their wall is lucky. It's for luck, primarily economic luck. That was surprising to me, particularly in Poland. Jews have not been very lucky in Poland. And it occurred to me that this is an opportunity. I built this. This is my frame. And on it, I've written the word lucky Jew, or Żyd na szczęście, which means Jew for luck. I'm going to go out onto the streets of Krakow today on Easter and sell some luck, sell some of me. I've had this made up. This is a picture of me counting my money. Well, actually, contemplating my money in this photo. I'm going to sell this, and people will put this on their wall for luck. Here I'm admiring my money. I'm just admiring it because my money is admirable. This is me just offering you money straight up. The hope is that if people purchase this, the money will just fall into their pockets. This is the Jew with the coin, the lucky Jew coffee mug. You know, usually people just put their Jews on their wall for luck. But with the coffee mug, people can drink their luck every morning. We're going to go out onto the streets of Krakow and we're going to try our luck. Na szczęście, na szczęście. Może kupić. Who wants? Szczęście autentyczne, na szczęście prawdziwe. Ja jestem Żydów i tu jest na szczęście, Żyd na szczęście, prawdziwe na szczęście. Jeśli macie obraz mnie, 100% na szczęście. Come with the photo?
All right, let's see the photo, please.
I didn't know that people put Jews on their wall. It's an opportunity for a business. I see an opportunity for a business, and so I've taken it.
You've got Jewish roots.
I'm 100% Jewish. Mam obraz! Jestem 100% Żydem tutaj. Tam nie są żydowski. Ja jestem Żydem. Jestem Żydem. Tu jest nie Żyd. Ja jestem Żyd. Tutaj. $330 zloty. And I'm sold out. Absolutely everything. Amazing. I love Poland. You too can buy your own Lucky Jew by going to luckyjew.pl. So as you can see, so this has been one of our most popular projects and one of our most controversial projects. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of feelings about the project. It's good to note, important to note, as Ezra earlier stated just a few days ago, we completed another project connected to these objects that we called the Lucky Jewathon. Some of you might have attended some things. Of course, ASPJ was a partner on the Lucky Jewathon. We had a couple of Australians who was a part, but essentially it was a 72-hour event where we, for 72 hours without stopping, we asked people from around the world to respond to the objects through panels, conversations, art projects, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It was a really wild, incredible event. I encourage you. I think that there are on the ASPJ Facebook page and our web and our page. There's a lot of video that's still up, and you can watch aspects of it. And essentially, I wanted to share this project because it's a really excellent example of the kinds of opportunities I see in Poland, and also a good reason why I continue to live in Poland, because, you know, these are problems that need to be resolved. And, you know, for me, I see these problems as opportunities, and, you know, festivals become a really important part of, you know, both how we're looking at these things artistically, but also how we're actually finding ways to transform. So out of this Lucky Jew project and in even the Lucky Jewathon, we at festivals have been able to engage with the city. We have now a partnership with the City of Krakow. A task force has been created, and we're in conversation in partnership with the city about what to do with these images, about what to do with these images of Jews with coins that continue to exist. It's a very, very interesting subject, and we can talk about it a bit more afterwards. But it's a really incredible example of what something like festivals has been able to do or to offer, what we've been able to do with festivals. And it's only one of many examples of how we're starting to help, I think, transform the contemporary landscape and how Jewishness is operating in the contemporary Polish landscape. Now, I want to, I'm moving sort of towards the ending, but there are a few things that I wanted to say and talk about. So I believe that Poland is one of the most significant contemporary Jewish spaces in the world. And contemporary is important because, of course, it used to be one of the most significant Jewish spaces in the world. And people wouldn't necessarily think of Poland in a contemporary way as important, but I believe that it is. Why? Identity politics. So for me, this means I've got an identity again, or it's shifted my relationship to my identity. I was born in Canada, and I'm grateful and feel fortunate about that, but I wasn't really born with a country. I wasn't born with a space that I was from. And it was really only because of Poland that I began to re-enter back into my Jewish identity. I personally didn't feel a particularly strong relationship with Israel. And so I really feel that a lot of the reason that I moved away from Jewish culture in general was particularly because I didn't really feel like I had a space or a real a contemporary history that I could hang my hat on to help me with my Jewish identity. And I'm just one of thousands of people who would say something similar, and I believe the potential for this to be true for many, many more people exists. It's a really important space for the negotiation of Jewish trauma. As we all know, we continue to experience trauma from the Shoah, and I believe that through building meaningful contemporary relationships to Poland, through reconnecting to Poland's pre-war history, to this beautiful landscape, to the positive aspects of Jewish culture, it's much more effective in helping us negotiate our trauma and find more positive ways towards healing. I think it's incredibly important to continue to focus on the Holocaust, and I believe that we shall never forget. But within the never forgetting, building positive relationships to this space that so many Jewish people are from, this part of the world that so many Jewish people are from, is a step towards healing. Poland is regenerating. It's, like I said earlier, it's one of the fastest growing Jewish communities in Europe, which is incredible. If you had told me that was true or that was even possible before I started coming to Poland, I would have laughed in your face. But the fact that Jewish culture is starting to thrive again in Poland is incredible. It also means that Hitler failed, which is important. And it means that the Jewish people are strong. And, for me, that was really, really inspiring. It inspired me to want to really step back into to Jewish culture. I'm not particularly religious. But, it felt like, in Jewish culture, Judaism never felt like a club. I always had a difficult time finding my way into the club. But I feel really strong and proud to be a part of this sort of culture that refuses to die in the place that, by all accounts, it should have died. And it's incredibly fascinating, this place. It's both an old and a new space. And so the way that Jewish culture is operating here is really fascinating. It's almost like a grassroots organization. And for me and for many Jews here who really don't necessarily feel like they necessarily fit in to the way Jewish culture is being practiced in certain parts of the world, or the hybrids of Jewish culture. And I think of like what Jewish culture has become in Canada is a hybrid. It's this evolving, and it doesn't necessarily look the same in all countries because it's so young in Poland. People are working so actively on trying to understand and discover what it means from all angles. And this is really, really interesting to see the rigor and how people are thinking about or trying to understand and figure out Jewish culture. And this has been really important for me because I feel like I fit in. I fit into that because I never really actively and rigorously wanted to do that for myself. I believe a strong contemporary Jewish Poland is important for the global Jewish community. It is where we are from. Not, of course, not everyone is from here, but the majority of Ashkenazi Jews were living in Poland or in the area before the war, and we're cut off from that reality. And it's a shame. We should not be, because it's in my opinion, some of the most significant aspects of who we've become. All of the clues to who to why and who we are here. This is where our stories are from. So this is the same, along the same lines, contemporary Jewish culture in Poland, a strong Jewish community in Poland continues to be an access point for these narratives, an access point for these stories for Jews. If the community here is not strong, and I believe it needs to get stronger, and I believe it needs support to get stronger, these stories, these histories will fade, and I think that eventually we could potentially lose them. A contemporary Jewish Poland gives us continuity and meaningful connection to who we are. Again, I continue to say this, but for me, this is a very personal statement, and I'm not the only, and I know many people feel the same way. But I get a lot of people, a lot of Polish people, non-Jewish Polish people, these days especially, where there's a very problematic government, there's lots of issues. People go, why on earth would you live here in Poland when you're Canadian, when you could be living in Canada? Which to a lot of people seems like one of the best countries in the world. I'm sure a lot of people in Australia might argue. But it's more meaningful right now in my life to be living here in Poland. And I'm very proud to communicate that when people ask me why I live here. And we have more healing to do. As a people, as a Jewish people, in a global sense, there's continues to be a lot of trauma, continues to be a lot of healing that needs to be done, and support. And I believe that Poland is a really important place to be able to do that. I can't tell you the number of times people have come to Poland and were surprised by how much they were enjoying themselves here, surprised by how meaningful it was for people to be here, surprised people were to be able to encounter Jews in Poland. Because a lot of people come and they're afraid of coming to Poland. And as was I, and it's scary, but to have a strong Jewish community here supporting the regeneration of Jewish community and culture in Poland is incredibly important, because it continues to be that access point for Jews around the world to our history. It's important for the Jews of Poland. It's important for the Jewish visitors. We have to have that life to connect to, and not only death. So it's important to come to the camps. And of course, hundreds of thousands of people come a year. It's important to come and see the camps. It's important to see the horrors. But being able to then also juxtapose that with life is essential. I believe it's essential for anyone who comes to Poland. And that life needs to be with Jews. Who would have thought that this was possible, that this contemporary Polish reality was possible? It's still amazing to me. I love talking to people about it because they're shocked. I don't know. Maybe everything I've said today is old news, and you all know about it. If you listen to Shudrich talk, then I'm sure he gave you a lot of what I've said as well. And many people will kind of talk about it in this way. But I think it's still important to reiterate the fact that Jewish culture is existing in Poland the way it is right now, after everything that's happened, is wild to me. It's still one of the most incredible things I've encountered. Is it a miracle? I don't know, but if you come to Poland, you'll see for yourself.